Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rollin'. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters.
It is June 25th, 12 noon straight up. Welcome to another edition of WorkComp Matters. We are brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the number one location for workers' compensation in both Southern California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. You can pick up their services. It's only $1 a day. WorkComp Matters is also brought to you by turchinlaw.com, 818-230-3110. If you need any workers' compensation, employment, or labor law advice, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm joined by the socialist voice of reason out there in friggin' Munich, Germany, Mr. John Scalia. Hot off the press, just notified by Scott of legendary Uncle Studio that Derek Chauvin of George Floyd case is being sentenced today. And so I asked him to feel free to break in the middle of the podcast if he gets any information on what the news is. I would think somewhere between 20 and 40 years. What do you think, John?
Well, I think that's probably what he deserves, but under the sentencing guidelines, because there were aggravations, he could get it. But as I said before the show started, I Googled that judge when the trial was going on, and that judge is a right-wing conservative Republican who loves the cops. I mean, it was presented to him that Chauvin had been brought up 16 times for excessive force, and the prosecution wanted to use that as an indication of his pattern of conduct, and he wouldn't let them do it. So I'm not too sure. It'll be interesting.
He's going to get at least a minimum of 20 years, but I think I know that his attorney is going to appeal any decision no matter what. And so if
under the sentencing guidelines, he could get as little as 10 and a half. I mean,
well, you know what, John, that's a good point, because the rumor is that they had a deal in place, a settlement of 10 years, and apparently it was thrown out by the judge. Apparently both sides had agreed to it, and it was thrown out, so the trial commenced. So if he gets close to 10 years, he might not appeal. But it was like a month or two ago, shortly after the trial, where they were going to appeal based on a variety of decisions, a variety of issues in the case. But
yeah, I have a comment on that too, and I said this on my TikTok post when I noticed he did it. I was really surprised that his lawyer, his name escapes me right now, who I thought was a competent trial lawyer, actually is the one who filed the appeal, because appellate law is a separate type of law. And generally speaking, there are specialists who do nothing but appellate law. And so for a trial lawyer to file that appeal in a case that important and involving somebody's liberty, I think was a big mistake, and B, very rare. I mean, I have filed appeals. In fact, somebody in our business who you probably know is a Harvard graduate, and he had never done an appeal to the Court of Appeals. He asked me to do it for him, which I did. So I've done some appellate work, but it's really generally an area for specialists. I was shocked that his lawyer filed it himself.
John, if you're referring to a workers' compensation attorney, I am not aware of any California work comp attorney that graduated from Harvard.
Now, this guy did. Yeah, he's
okay.
Really nice. Yeah.
All right. Way to go. Well, coming back to Southern California, in where John sowed his oats, San Francisco employee unions snapped back against an order that city workers receive a coronavirus vaccination on penalty of firing, calling for a more collaborative approach, while an advocacy group warned that black workers could be disciplined more often than others under the mandate. And John, I know you have an accompanying story here, so we'll do our best not to repeat. The Service Employees International Union, Local 1021, which represents 20,000 San Francisco employees, called the policy a threatening mandate yesterday. That union and other unions said the city would have to negotiate it with the unions than imposing it unilaterally. And one thing that this story does not say that I know for 100% certainty is that the requirement to be vaccinated or otherwise be fired does not go into effect until there is full FDA approval on the vaccine. John.
Yeah, it's a companion story. SF vaccine mandate gets pushed back from unions and black employees. It's from the San Francisco Chronicle. San Francisco's employee unions snapped back against an order that city workers receive a coronavirus vaccination.
John, that's the exact same story. So my fault. That is the exact same story, at least what I read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the only comment I was going to make on that is, once again, I find it bizarre that America has a situation where unions are talking about what is appropriate medical care in the workplace or anywhere. That's not the job of unions, and that's not their expertise. It's simply a comment on the role of money in the American economy and the role of power. I mean, obviously, that should be determined by people with expertise. And I understand that the workers are involved and they may have a voice in it, but they're not medical experts. And it should be the people who know the medicine, because we're talking about exposing the entire population to this thing. And I'm sorry, individual rights just have to be subordinated to what is the common good, a concept which apparently has disappeared in America.
Well, John, isn't part of a union's function, if not the main function, to protect the workers' individual rights?
That's an interesting question. I've represented both unions and I've represented companies. I would say, generally speaking, that unions' primary objective is working conditions, not rights. They're interested in the conditions of the work and the salary. Rights is just something that may come in tangentially. I mean, they're not supposed to be, they all have lawyers, but that's not what they do. I mean, what they do is they negotiate terms and conditions of the employment. What they're saying is this is a condition, which it is, of employment. But the problem is, yeah, it's a condition of employment, but it has to do with the common good and the public good. And therefore, it's really outside the bailiwick of unions. Unions are extremely narrow-minded. It brings to mind, since I'm really old, back in the Vietnam War, when George Meany, who was the head of the AFL-CIO, was asked, because the union members' kids were going off to war and getting killed. And he said, what's the union's position about the Vietnam War? And Meany said, well, really, it doesn't concern us, meaning it didn't affect our wages. So, I mean, that's basically, he got a lot of flack for that, but he was being really honest. I mean, that's really what they do. And they don't care about the public good generally.
And in addition to, or tangentially, with the conditions of employment, as in this case, are the conditions for termination.
Yeah, but that's like saying that you have a transmissible disease, and as part of the employment, the union is going to argue that you have a right to be there and infect everybody. I mean, that's crazy. No offense, but that's insane. No,
I hear you loud and clear. We're going to take it up to John, why don't you go ahead and read the news, your next news story? Okay,
this is from the California Helpline Daily Edition, and it's directly from them. Doctors lobby. This again goes to money in medicine. Doctors lobby scores major victory on bill to hold physicians accountable. Patients and some lawmakers have long blasted the Medical Board of California for failing to discipline negligent or abusive physicians. But the politically powerful California Medical Association, which represents doctors, has mobilized against the latest attempt to give the board more money and power to investigate complaints. So there you have it. again, it's a question of money, and they were going to give the board more money. So the association, the California Medical Association, remains opposed to the provision that would restore the board's ability to recoup investigative costs and has concerns about the role of the independent monitor. Yeah, you bet. In its report to the legislature, the medical board projected it would be insolvent by the end of 2021-22. That's the enforcement mechanism, without an increase in licensing fees. Doctors, quote, just don't want to pay for it, said Bridget Graham, an attorney at the Center for Public Interest Law at the University of San Diego School of Law. What is the money going for? It's going for a stronger discipline system, which they don't want. This goes right back to what I was saying about unions, because folks, the California Medical Association is the same thing as a union for plumbers or electricians or craft workers. They may have better degrees and they may have better suits and better cars, but it's the same deal, and it's the same greedy, non-public good interest that's being served.
I'm trying to remember if it was representatives of the California Medical Association that were with Joe Biden were with the Governor Gavin Newsom at the French Laundry. I know that
yes.
The California Medical Association.
Their lobbyist was with him.
Exactly. Going to national news, President Biden yesterday said he won't sign the bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal unless Congress doesn't also pass a reconciliation bill committing to a dual track system to get both bills passed. I expect that in the coming months this summer, before the fiscal year is over, that we will have voted on this bill, the infrastructure bill, as well as voted on the budget resolution. But if only one comes to me, this is the only one that comes to me, I'm not signing it. It's in tandem, Biden told reporters at the White House. All bills that we hear about, all proposed legislation always has tangential stuff attached to it, commonly referred to as pork. And every representative in the House of Representatives plus senators, they want their pork for their states and their district. This is one of the first times I can recall a president saying, I will sign this bill, but only if the other bill is brought to me. I don't recall before, and I'm sure it's happened, I just don't recall a president actually coming out and saying that I will only sign this bill if you bring me another bill. John?
Well, what happened was that originally it was one bill, and the Republicans balked at the overall expense and claimed that a lot of the money he was saying was infrastructure was not infrastructure. So in order to get a consensus in the Senate, he basically split the baby, and the Republicans signed off on the first bill that's going to hit his desk. And so what he's saying is, I'm sorry, it's really a package, and either both bills or no bill. So that's the backstory on the bill. It originally was one bill, but the one that's being sent to him as a result of the compromise that had to be worked out with the Republicans in order to get something to his desk.
You're dialed in. Oh, John, were you finished?
Yeah.
You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the number one location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. And if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too. It's only $1 a day. Work Comp Matters is also brought to you by turchinlaw.com. 818-230-3110. If you need any workers' compensation, employment, or labor law advice, John has the next news story.
Sacramento Catholic churches can now open at full capacity with some health precautions. Sacramento Bishop Jaime Soto this week encouraged all Catholics to return to church, as all parishes in the diocese may now host Mass and other services at 100% of the seating capacity, but some health precautions will remain in place. Early on during the COVID-19 pandemic, Catholics are granted a dispensation for their obligation to attend Sunday Mass. Having been raised Catholic, what they tell you is, if you don't show up every Sunday, you're going to hell. That's literally what they say. That dispensation has now been rescinded, and Catholics in the Sacramento region are once again obliged to personally attend and participate in Sunday Mass, according to a news release from the Catholic Diocese of Sacramento. In the Holy Mass, we share the Last Supper with the Lord Jesus and stand at the foot of his cross. This is a cherished moment for Catholics to worthily receive the holy body and blood of our Redeemer, Soto said in the news release. You know, one of the nice things that happened to me when I became Protestant was I no longer had to go to church on Sunday unless I wanted to. The other thing was Martin Luther split from the Roman Catholic Church because he said, really? You guys are cannibals every Sunday? It's really the body and blood of Christ? No, I think it's symbolic. And of course, that created Protestantism. Interesting. Anyway, that's part of the reason that we have a healthy disrespect for all organized religions which force their participants to believe or do things whether or not they want to.
And under the category of, really, are you kidding me? Nearly all COVID-19 deaths in the United States now are in people who were not vaccinated. A staggering demonstration of how effective the jabs have been, and an indication that deaths per day, now down to under 300, that's in the entire country, could be practically zero if everyone eligible got the vaccine. Well, I don't know who's not eligible except for children under 12. An Associated Press analysis of available government data from May shows that the breakthrough infections in fully vaccinated people accounted for fewer than 1,200 of more than 853,000 COVID-19 hospitalizations. That's about 0.1%. And again, I'm going to go back to, it appears to me that nowadays the groups of people that have the lowest vaccination rates, at least in Los Angeles County, are county sheriffs in the county sheriff department. It's at 30%. In Los Angeles, the LAPD police department and the LA fire department are right around 50% who have gotten at least one jab. John.
Okay, this goes back to what Steve and I were talking about in terms of splitting those two infrastructure bills. This is from NPR. Here's what's included in the infrastructure deal that Biden struck with senators. After weeks of negotiations, President Biden and a bipartisan group of senators have announced a deal on infrastructure spending. The agreement focuses on investments in roads, railways, bridges, and broadband internet, but it does not include investments Biden has referred to as, quote, human infrastructure, close quote, including money allocated for childcare and tax credits for families. According to the White House, the price tag comes in at $1.2 trillion over 8 years, with more than $500 billion in new spending. How the measure would be paid for was a central point in negotiations, with Republicans opposed to undoing any of the 2017 tax cuts. Editorial note, those tax cuts benefited mainly the rich. What a shock. The plan, quote, makes transformational and historic investments in clean transportation infrastructure, clean water infrastructure, universal broadband infrastructure, clean power infrastructure, remediation of legacy pollution, and resilience to the changing climate, said a White House fact sheet on the plan released Thursday. So there you go. That's exactly why the bills have been bifurcated, and that's what's in the bill that's going to reach his desk first.
I'm sure everybody has heard about I believe it's the 11 or 12-story condo, which partially collapsed in Florida yesterday morning. Here's what we currently know. At least 159 people remain missing after the residential building partially collapsed in Surfside, Florida yesterday. Search and rescue teams are racing to find survivors. At least 4 people are confirmed dead. Emergency officials are also asking people to call area code 305-614-1819 if they have relatives who are unaccounted for. The cause of the collapse is still unknown. what we know so far, and I'm just going to speculate, this does not appear to be a terrorist situation. This building was either due and or was in the process of having its 40-year inspection. It was built, I believe, in 1981, well, definitely 1981, 1982. Additionally, it appears why so many people are currently unaccounted for is because this was traditionally a vacation spot. A lot of these condos and a lot of the condos in the building were used for vacation, Airbnb, and people may have not arrived yet or were planning to get there. But I've read in the news that this building, be it a millimeter or two or an inch or whatever, has apparently been sinking like somewhere between a millimeter and an inch per year. John.
Yeah, there's been two theories advanced as to why this thing collapsed. I mean, obviously, if this happened in a third world country, we would suspect corruption. So one of the things that occurs to me is why is the United States immune from that suspicion? Why isn't there a suspicion that somebody got bribed in the construction of the building to look the other way when substandard construction techniques were used? That should certainly be one area of inquiry. The other
40,
two,
John, 40 years ago? 40 years ago?
what, you think corruption is a new thing?
I'm just asking. 40 years ago. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, 1980? Are you kidding me? That was the year when anything went. Those were the big stock. The stock market went nuts. That was the Reagan economy where everything was going. I mean, money was king, and when money's king, corruption and bribery happens. But anyway,
sure.
I have heard the theory of the subsidence thing that you were talking about, and it was 2 centimeters a year. So my question there is, well, if they knew the thing was sinking, why didn't they do anything about it? Because apparently the only renovation going on was on the roof. Well, as far as I know, and I ain't no civil engineer, but as far as I know, you can't fix a sinking building from the roof. So apparently they weren't doing anything about the sinking, which they knew was happening. And of course, the other suspicion is that structurally the building was defective, and they would have to get a structural engineer to review the plans and see whether or not the plans were inherently defective. And of course, that also brings in my prior comment about whether or not somebody was paid to look the other way in case the plans were defective. So there we have the theories, and the investigation will take place, and we'll just wait and see.
And apparently, a class action lawsuit was just filed before 11:30 last night. The suit was filed by Manuel Dresner in Miami-Dade County just before 11 p.m. And of course, its purpose is to compensate the victims of this unfathomable loss. Part of the 12-story building collapsed about 1:30 a.m. yesterday. The building has 136 units. 55 in the northeast corridor were gone in a matter of seconds. And as I said earlier, 159 people are unaccounted for. John.
Yeah, let me comment. Before I came to Munich, years before, I had inherited my mother's house, which was the house my grandfather built. And that house I had built. And that house was built in 1929. It hasn't collapsed yet. My point is, if you build something right, they're not supposed to crash. Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
Journalism that holds power to account. This is from, where is this from? This is from ProPublica. The U.S. is closing a loophole that lured Mexicans over the border to donate blood plasma for cash. This is one of those articles you say, this has got to be a Saturday Night Live plant, but it's not. Selling blood plasma in the U.S. could net Mexican residents hundreds of dollars a month if they donated often enough, but some are putting their health at risk to do so. A federal agency is closing a legal loophole that allowed U.S.-based blood plasma companies to harvest plasma from thousands of Mexicans a day who were lured by bonus payments and hefty cash rewards. As a 2019 ProPublica and ARD German TV investigation showed. Well, I guess the United States now needs Germany to keep them honest. U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced on June 15 that effective immediately, it would no longer permit Mexican citizens to cross into the U.S. on temporary visas to sell their blood plasma. A statement provided to ProPublica and ARD, that's the German network, said that donating plasma is now considered, quote, labor for hire, close quote, you think, which is illegal under the visitor visa most border residents use to cross into the United States to make donations. So there you have it, and again, money interfering with public good and the private companies that take the plasma and these Mexicans get this visa to donate their blood, they may risk their health. And of course, nobody mentions in the article whether some of them decided, well, as long as I'm here, maybe I'll stay here. Who knows?
My last story of the show. Customers behind on their utility bills have 3 more months of assurance they will not get their power shut off for non-payment after the California Public Utilities Commission passed an extension yesterday. In related news, a dangerous and potential historic heat wave is expected to bring more triple-digit temperatures to parts of Northern California. I would say recently and this year, it has been hotter in Northern California than in Southern California. What the heck is going on? John, we got time for one more news story from you.
NBC News, under Trump, gains in healthcare coverage for Latino children mostly erased. Latino children were disproportionately affected by an overall increase in child uninsured rates between 2016 and 2019 when Donald Trump was president. According to a recent study, more than 1.8 million Latino children lacked health coverage as of 2019, a rate of 9.3%, according to the study from the Center for Children and Families at Georgetown University, released June 8. That is an increase of 354,000 children compared to 2016, when the uninsured rate of Latino children was at 7.7%. The uninsured rate of non-Latino children increased from 3.7% in 2016 to 4.4% in 2019. That's the end of that one.
All right, John. Thank you very much. Closing thoughts or burning desires?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Derek Chauvin gets sentenced to. As I said, it's a Republican judge who's very conservative. So we'll see what the sentence is. And if he gets a minimum, I suspect that there will be some blowback.
I would agree with you, too. And Scott did not break in. Therefore, I'm presuming that decision has not come yet. I want to thank you all very much for listening to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. And Scott says, I think it's coming down this second. Okay. Let me see. Work Comp Matters is brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the #1 location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. And if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too. It's only $1 a day. Work Comp Matters is also brought to you by turchinlaw.com. 818-230-3110. If you need any workers' compensation, employment, or labor law advice, I'm going to give Scott another minute, or actually the judge another minute, and then we will sign off. For those of you listeners that are on Clubhouse, we've got and Scott says they're taking a break. Okay, thank you, Scott. Tonight on Clubhouse, 6 p.m. Standard Time, is my interview that we did on the Steve and Monica Show with Spike Cohen, the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. So if any of you got nothing to do, you're completely bored, or you want to hear Spike or hear me do a really good interview, that's at 6 p.m. mancavepodcasting.com, Steve Appel on Clubhouse. I want to thank very much Scott Walton, legendary Uncle Studio, John Scalia out in Munich, Germany, all the good people back at the workcompcentral.com and turchinlaw.com. My name is Steve Appel. We'll see you again Monday at 12 noon live for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Stay hydrated, everybody.